What we can know is that over time, we will see the impact of the fact that we are exhausting the high-quality resources. One way or another, that is going to impact our economy. It's going to impact air travel as well as the auto industry. And I've been having discussions over the past few weeks with folks at Boeing, folks at the World Bank who are in charge of global air transport. They are worried. Peak oil also means peak food, because we've created an agricultural system that depends overwhelmingly on cheap fossil fuels. We make nitrogen fertilizer out of natural gas. We make pesticides and herbicides out of oil. We use diesel to fuel our tractors. We use oil to transport farm inputs to the farm and farm outputs off the farm. The average food item on an American plate travels 1,500 miles to get there. On average, for every calorie of food energy we produce in modern industrial agriculture, we invest 10 calories of fossil fuel energy. Now, remember, in agrarian societies, farming was the main source of net energy profit. That's how we got our energy. So now, for us to have created an agricultural system that is an overwhelming energy sink, that's an enormous vulnerability for our society. We've said we're willing to invest more money more energy in agriculture than we get as energy in food. How long will that work? I don't know. Peak oil may mean the end of economic growth as we've known it, because economic growth has to be founded in growth in the real economy, ultimately, or else that seeming economic growth vanishes like a vapor, as it's doing right now, as trillions of dollars evaporate from the world economy. And how does the real economy grow? By people doing things, and without energy, nothing gets done. How does China finance its rapid 10% a year economic growth? Through rapid energy growth, specifically coal. The International Energy Agency is gradually changing its tune. For a long time, that organization, which was founded in the 1970s in Paris as a watchdog to warn us of any future oil supply problems, it has been doing a very bad job of that, I have to say. But just now, within the last couple of days, the IEA has released a new report that is beginning to change that message. The chief economist, Fatih Birol, has gone on record as saying this: we must leave oil before it leaves us. Yeah, that is the truth. So what would be a sensible energy policy? It's not hard to figure out in broad terms. Now, in details, endless debate can happen, and there are lots of policy options. But in general, we have to reduce our fossil fuel consumption ahead of scarcity. And there are other good reasons for that as well. I haven't even mentioned climate change, which is, in fact, the greatest crisis facing our species, and the greatest crisis that ever has faced our species. And because of that, we need to reduce our fossil fuel consumption for the sake of future generations and the rest of the animals and plants in the biosphere and so on. But okay, let's suppose we're really selfish and we say, you know, forget about future generations and forget about the other species and so on. We're going to have as much economic growth as we can right now. Well, that doesn't work either, because the high-quality fossil fuels just aren't there. And if we want to avoid an economic crash from which there will be no recovery, we've got to get out ahead of depletion and voluntarily reduce our fossil fuel dependency so that we won't be hit so much by scarcity. We have to support energy conservation and development of renewable energy, support research into renewable energy, and replace the infrastructure we've built that works with fossil fuels with energy infrastructure, transport infrastructure, agricultural infrastructure that works with renewables and that works with lower energy inputs. This is not rocket science. We've known this since the 1970s. I haven't said a single new thing. What's the Obama plan? Well, fortunately, the new administration is placing the energy transition from fossil fuels very high on its agenda, and that's heartening. I think there's an opening, the possibility of fundamental change. There certainly is not a guarantee of that, because if you look at what the Obama team proposed during the last few months, it does leave something to be desired. The whole notion of clean coal. I'll talk more about that in my talk tomorrow, but the short judgment on that is there's probably no there. And what's being proposed to spend on renewables is $150 billion over 10 years. Now, $150 billion is a good start per year, but over 10 years, that's simply not the scale of investment that we really need. Why? Because we're starting so far behind in this process of energy transition. This is the current U.S. energy budget. You'll notice there's a renewable energy slice of the pie that represents about 6 or 7%. And of that 6 or 7%, only about 2% is wind and about 1% is solar. Now, those are growing quickly. They are the fastest growing energy sources on a percentage basis, but guess what is the fastest growing energy source in the world on a quantitative basis? It's coal, by far. All coal has to do is grow 1% per year, and it completely wipes out gains in renewables. So this is where we're starting from. Way less than 1% of our national energy budget currently is coming from solar and wind combined. As a result of this, I think there are some fairly inevitable future trends. I don't think we're going to be able to grow renewable energy fast enough to replace fossil fuels on a one-to-one basis. That's why energy conservation, energy efficiency, energy curtailment of energy use, these things have to occupy center stage in our transition policy because they can be deployed quickly and because they are cheaper than new energy sources. We're going to need lots more people growing our food. Why? Because the only way our current agricultural system works, where 1% of the population feeds everybody else, the only way that works is if that 1% have access to cheap fossil fuel to run their tractors, to fertilize their fields, and so on. Without the cheap fossil fuels, we're going to need a different kind of agriculture, more local production for local consumption, and more of us involved in the process. I don't mean every one of us has to have 5,000 acres. I mean we'll need lots more gardeners, including urban gardeners, and we will need a whole generation of young farmers willing to take on this rewarding and difficult work. We're going to need to relocate people because we've built cities in deserts where we assume that everything's going to be imported. Energy, water, materials, stuff of every kind. Think of Las Vegas or Phoenix. Now, I have nothing against people who live in these cities, but I look at what's going on there and I say, this is not going to end well. And we're going to need a massive replacement of infrastructure. And I would just start with transport infrastructure. We have built highways. We've torn up railroads and we've built highways. And we've spent hundreds upon hundreds of billions of dollars in doing so. This is the ideal transport infrastructure for the late 20th century. But it's going to be an utter failure in the 21st century. In fact, we're going to need lots more railroads. A lot of those railroads that we tore up to build highways, we're going to have to rebuild